Ciao everyone and welcome back to the analysis of the song that ranked 15th at Sanremo Music Festival 2026. Don't panic, please. I know that is new, but I'm going to explain in the next videos why this is happening. Don't worry. But let's analyze songs as usual for now. So, Italia Starter Pack by J-Ax. Here, for the translation, there is not much I can translate because the title of the song is already in English because Starter Pack is an expression taken from English. I could translate it as Italy Starter Pack if you really wanted to perfectly translate it. However, you might think, but Silvia, don't you have in Italian a way to say starter pack? Not really, because starter pack is an expression came out from memes, okay? In Italian, we can have the translation of the explanation or the literal explanation and translation of starter pack, but is natively English. So translating it, yes, you can do it, but it's going to be losing a little bit its purpose. In fact, when asked about the song, J-Ax explained the starter pack is the basic package. In Italian he said il pacchetto base, okay? So what you need to start something, an activity, a sport, a hobby. So the Italia Starter Pack is what you need to start living in Italy, or generally what you need to start with Italy. Okay, so it is the Italia Starter Pack. Now, let's talk about the lyrics, however. Because just like with other song, Lorenzo Coveri did his analysis. And he said, J-Ax, Alessandro Aleotti, 53 years old, founder with DJ Jad of Articolo 31, because he used to be in a duo before, has entirely forgotten his funk and hip-hop past, because technically J-Ax is a rapper and a hip-hop artist. He returns for the second time and his first solo to the Ariston, the theater of Sanremo Music Festival, with a, so he claims, country song inspired by Johnny Cash. The song's title suggests it will be a basic package or a mocking survival kit for traveling safely in Italy, no less. A vast program because there are many things in this starter pack. It's a very well packaged starter pack. A list of stereotypes with some truth, because yes, J-Ax is playing on stereotypes, but the whole point is also to have social critique. Emerges echoing Rino Gaetano or Eli from La Terra dei Cachi, Sanremo 1996. Amusing, but with, as always, a grain of truth. Obviously, the language is crackling, overspoken, full of colloquialisms, dislocations, youthful shorthands, so slang basically, and soft coprolalia, so like swearing. There is swearing in the song, but nothing crazy, let's put it like that. That said, let's see what is the lyric about. Let's see what are the so-called items you can find in Italia Starter Pack. So, the structure of the song per se is quite simple because we're going to have verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. However, the verses are a little bit peculiar because each verse is divided into 3 sections that you can tell apart also thanks to the music. So, what is the first verse? What do we have in our starter pack? Dice sempre il vecchio del quartiere con molti più anni dei denti che ha. Sto paese lo capisci da un cantiere, 5 dicono che fare, uno solo che lo fa. Says always the old man from the neighborhood, with many more ears that the teeth he has. You can tell this country from a construction site. 5 implied people say what to do, only one does it. Also, like here it is then, not that. Anyway, so we start with our protagonist, our singer, listening to the old man from the neighborhood. Here in Italy, we have a specific term to describe this type of person, which, however, is not homogeneous in the whole of Italy because technically it's from dialect. I am talking about the umarell, which is a term from Napolitan, so it's not really Italian, but what matters is that describes perfectly the old person, the old retired man who goes around the city and mainly inspect the construction sites to comment on what is happening. So we have the old man from the neighborhood, from the block, with many more ears than the teeth he has. Because it's jokingly about the fact that many people, when they get old, mainly in poor neighborhoods, of course, are struggling keeping their teeth. So he has more ears than teeth. Because let's remember that in Italian, we have our ears. It's not I am X amount years old. In Italy is io ho tot anni. So I have my age, I have my ears. That's why in Italian this construction, this joke works very well. This play on words works very well. And what is the first thing that you have to know about Italy? That there are 5 people speaking about what we should do, and there is only one person actually really doing what it has to be done. And then what next? Meglio essere fuori che finire dentro. Tutti hanno qualcosa da nascondere. Santi in paradiso non ce n'è al momento. Più che avere fede è meglio un complice. Better to be out than end up in. But where? Prison. Both essere fuori and finire dentro are two way of sayings, two idioms, two idiomatic expressions, if you will, both implying prison. Everyone has something to hide. There are no saints in heaven right now. Literally, saints in heaven, there are none at the moment. And this, at least according to Lorenzo Coveri, is a very recognizable tribute to Lucio Dalla. And then, più che avere fede, because in Italian you can say abbi fede, have faith, it's better to have an accomplice. So be very careful. Despite Italy being depicted as very Catholic country, there are no saints here, and it's better to have an accomplice because everybody is kinda acting shady. So better like this, better try to outplay others than to be outplayed, because this is the game. Condividi la password che facciamo a metà il wifi. Canta un coro da stadio così sanno chi sei dovunque vai. Share the password so that we can split the Wi-Fi as in its cost. Sing a terrace chant, so like the chants you sing when you are at a stadium watching generally a football or soccer match, so they know who you are wherever you go. Now, this is actually something very discussed in Italy, because there is this issue where we try to keep our distance from other Italians when we are traveling because we really don't want to be recognized. And yes, there are many Italians who are very recognizable for being loud and singing the things you would sing at the stadium, which it is not a compliment, okay, here. So this is what is in our starter pack so far. Many people, more people are speaking, are talking about what it should be done than actually, but there are very few actually doing what it needs to be done. Everyone is pretty much trying to scam each other, so at this point it's better to have an accomplice than to pray or wait or hope for a saint in heaven. Uh, kind of broke about sharing password for the Wi-Fi, like trying to trick a bit as much as possible, and then being loud and not presenting ourselves in the best way. Why of these things? We're going to talk about it later because I'm going to explain how this song came to see the light. And then we have the chorus. The chorus is going to be the same throughout the whole part of the song. And fun fact, it is also the part that J-Ax said is his favorite. Serve una brutta canzone che fa papapparappa, mollare tutto a metà, qui per campare serve un po' di culo, sempre. È vietato, ma fa niente, ti passo la canna del gas. Italia Starter Pack. So, what else? We need a bad song that goes papapparappa. Why? Because there are many pop songs a bit a bit ignorant, we could talk it like that, like very cheap, very commercial, that go very hard, however. Then another characteristic is to leave everything halfway, so starting to do things and then never completing them. Fun fact, this is actually a problem infrastructurally speaking because we have many projects which got started but never completed, and this is a big issue. Here, to get by, you need a little luck, always. It's forbidden, but it doesn't matter. I pass you the gas hose. Italia Starter Pack. Now, here we need some explanations. Despite this thing about having bad commercial songs, sounding very similar among each other, starting things but leaving them halfway, with of course consequently a waste of resources. He also says to leave, because campare is another way to say to leave, not as used, at least not everywhere. And then the expression, which I translated, you need a little luck, serve un po' di culo. Avere culo, in Italian, it is literally to have ass, because culo is ass, not as vulgar, not as refined either, like it is very colloquial. And in fact, avere culo, it means to be lucky. French people might understand it better because there is a similar way of saying in French as well, involving, however, another part of the body. And then it's forbidden, but it doesn't matter. Sadly, it happens a lot, this thing where many Italians think about laws and rules more like a suggestion than actual impositions. And in fact, I read every now and then on the social media people saying, oh my god, I'm so surprised that in Italy you can do this. In my country, this is forbidden. This is against the law. And it's like, yeah, in Italy it is illegal as well, but the people don't care much. It's not that everybody does it. However, as you might know, the issue is that you need a small percentage of people doing it, and this creates issues for everybody. And then here, ti passo la canna del gas. Now, here we need some explanations because it's not as easy. Now, ti passo la canna del gas. Literally, I pass you the gas hose. But what is this gas hose and why should you pass it? Now, first of all, ti passo la canna. Passare una canna means to pass a joint because canna has several meanings. It can be like the fishing rod, for example, canna da pesca. La canna, it is a long stick, okay? Among the other things, la canna being a long, more or less long stick, it can also represent, colloquially speaking, the joint. So yeah, when you roll the cannabis into the cigarette shape to smoke it. So passarsi le canne means to pass around the joints. And J-Ax really likes to joke on this. In fact, the most viewed video of his songs on YouTube, at least, is in fact a whole song dedicated to cannabis and how much he loves it. So we have this first part, which is the first part of the play on words. But why la canna del gas, the gas hose? So, now, essere alla canna del gas is a real idiomatic expression in Italian, and it means to have reached an extreme situation, but for the worst. And it is often also implied to say that someone or yourself is or are broke. So, è alla canna del gas, so this person is desperate, this person is completely broke, okay? Concerning the origin, why la canna del gas? It is not very clear. One of the most common interpretation of the origin dates back to when we had town gas. So when you had the lightning in cities fueled by gas. Now, this gas derived from the distillation of coal and contain carbon monoxide, which is a lethal gas, something you should really not inhale. So, in that context, when the way of saying the idiom was born, attaccarsi alla canna del gas, so to attach oneself to the gas hose, mean to give up on life, let's put it like that, because it meant inhaling this lethal gas. So, of course, this became this came to represent an extreme action, expression of extreme desperation. So here it was a little bit complex. In fact, even J-Ax was joking that many Italian people, native speaker, are not going to understand the joke, and chances are he's right. Then we have the second and last verse. Pretty much the structure is the same. Dice l'uomo che mi fa la benza che chi guida non deve avere pietà. Sto paese è come con la precedenza. È solo di chi se la prende, non è mai di chi ce l'ha. So, as you might have noticed, the start is very similar to the other verse. Says the man who refuels my car, or fuels my car, because fare benzina, here benza, it is a truncation, very, very colloquial truncation, almost dialect-wise, where he is saying fare benzina, so to refuel the car, because the benzina is the gas, I think. I never remember which fuel is what, but one of the two types of fuel to refuel the car. So, fare benzina is to refuel the car. Now, I don't know around the world. I am going to put this out just to be clear. In Italy, sometimes you have two options because it's not everywhere. But in some gas stations you have the operator, ok? Il benzinaio, so the gas station operator, ok? And in some places they refuel the car for you. In some others you refuel for yourself. It depends on you. You can decide when you have this option. For example, I know people who don't like to refuel themselves to avoid having to clean their hands after, and so on and so on and so on. So they really enjoy when you have the personnel helping you to refuel. Then, what is this gas station operator saying? That those who drive should have no mercy. This country, so Italy, is like with giving way when driving. It's just of those who take it. It never belongs to those who have it. Here, like, again, many layer on layer on layer of explanations. So, first of all, in Italian you say dare la precedenza, to give way. So, when you are driving and due to the road laws, you have to let someone pass. Of course, Italy, Europe in general, because concerning these parts, we are trying to be more and more, at least within the European Union, to be more and more standardized. There are several rules telling you when you have to give way when driving. Of course, it is generally related to safety reasons, to avoid causing accidents. In Italy, this is a great problem because there are many people who don't care about the logic of giving way and they just take the way, because since in Italian you say dare la precedenza, to give way, the opposite is prendere la precedenza, which of course it is illegal. Do people care, however? As we said before, absolutely no. In fact, I really recommend not driving in Italy if you are on vacation for your own mental health and also physical health. I really not recommending it. Already I don't enjoy driving. Driving in Italy is really something that I try to avoid as much as possible. Not because it's hard per se, probably if you're not used to driving certain small road, of course, can be hard. It's not about parking, it is about the other people. I really don't enjoy it. Anyway, that said, here there is already this whole explanation plus the metaphor behind, because in this country, so in Italy, even if you have by law a right to do something, to have something, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter who has right to something, it matters who takes it. Of course, here all the metaphors are very exaggerated, but there is some truth, ok, in this. Meno cose sai, più sarai contento. Facciamoci una botta di felicità. Qui non si protesta per lo stipendio, solo per la pizza con l'ananas. And here I have to say he's very right indeed. The less things you know, the happier you will be. Let's have a shot of happiness. Here we don't protest for the salaries, about the salaries, only about pineapple pizza. And here he is very correct. So, meno cose sai, più sarai contento. The less you know, the happier you will be. It is a reference to the so-called code of silence, which in Italian is also called omertà. So when you know things, very often illegal things are happening, but you don't speak because you don't want problems yourself. And this is very detrimental as a behavior. We are trying to fight it a lot, but it is still a great problem. And it is so much eradicated in our culture that we even have several proverbs and way of sayings concerning this point. One of the most popular coming to mind right now, it is Chi si fa I fatti suoi campa cent'anni, which is a softer version of the original one, because the original one is not the original one, but the one that is the most used is a little bit more vulgar. That's why I am going to the softer version. And it means those who minds their own businesses live for 100 years. As in, they don't end up murdered. Just to put this into perspective. And then we don't protest for the salaries, for the wages, but only about pineapple pizza. And this is to represent the fact that Italians have this very bad habit about complaining the most futile things and not the real ones. Because while we have countries literally attached to us, like France having minimum wage, because no, Italy does not have minimum wage, we complain about the most absolute stupid things, like the pineapple on pizza, which has like a whole story behind. I'm not going to talk about it now. But here is basically saying there are discussion over silly things, because yes, doesn't matter what you see on the internet, discussing so much about pineapple pizza or when you should drink cappuccino is overkill and definitely not needed. But the issue is that there is not enough protest for things really important. For example, the salaries. We even had a referendum last year, and people prefer going to the beach than voting for better salaries. It is crazy, I know. Of course, things were a little bit more complex, and there is a whole problem with misinformation and whatnot, but still, it is a big problem. We have a big problem with wages in Italy right now. And then, per pagare c'è tempo, tanto i debiti già ce li hai. Goditi sto momento che quando vai mica lo sai. There's time to pay, anyway you already have debts. Enjoy this moment, you don't know when you'll go. What does it mean? So, first of all, the fact that some people, with the mentality that anyway they already have a lot of debts, because again, since we have issues with wages, we have issues with anything coming consequently. And of course, this is a reference to all those services promising you split payments, because like, don't worry, keep buying. Here there is of course also a criticism towards consumerism and capitalism, because keep buying, anyway you are already submerged into debts. So that one debt more, one debt less doesn't change. Of course, this is not a good mentality, and that's why it is on the list of the problems. Goditi sto momento, it appears several times, it is a colloquial truncation of questo, that's why enjoy this moment, che quando vai mica lo sai, that when you will go, you don't know. Like, you don't know when you will go, and you might ask, but go where? Well, when you die, quando vai, so like andarsene and whatnot, in several contexts can be used as an euphemism for dying. We are full. I think I can count more than 100 euphemisms for dying in the Italian language. So that is one of them. Then what else? Again, we have the chorus, which is exactly as before, and then we have one little bridge going towards the next and last chorus, which will also have the function of outro. What is the bridge saying? E ci dicono che siamo disonesti, furbetti, tutti dei gran figli di mamma, di leggi sbagliate e di caffè corretti, ma abbiamo pure dei difetti, e in effetti. And they tell us we are dishonest, crafty, or cunning, because furbo is like crafty, cunning, smart, but in a way to go around rules. all great mama's boys of bad laws and spite coffees, but we also have flaws. And in fact, and then this in fact introduces then the chorus, which, as I said, is going to have the function of the outro for the song. Now, so we have a series of basically insults because dishonest, crafty, or cunning, mama's boy because another thing that in part it is a symptom of a problem, in part it's just a stereotype, in part it is true. Because of the thing that we stay a long time with our parents. For some people, it is really due to independence issues. Because like they struggle being independent and they are basically men children. But it is also true that, do you remember when we were saying that there is a big issue with wages? Well, due to this, of course, it is also very hard to afford rents because the issue is that, yes, we have a problem with wages, which are very low and didn't grow almost at all through the years. However, all the rest kept growing in prices. So doing the grocery is much harder, going to school is much harder, paying the rent is much harder. So generally, the cost of life is much higher than 30 years ago, but the wages didn't grow, not even close. So for many people, there is no other choice. Is either living with your own parents or being homeless. And this is a big issue across all over Italy. And I'm saying this as a person who was very lucky and was able to go study and work outside of Italy. So I'm not living with my parents anymore, but I can tell you that I have many of my friends who literally don't have a choice because they cannot buy a house, they can barely rent it. They cannot even buy a house with loans because they don't have wages good enough to to get loans to buy houses, so it is a disaster. And then leggi sbagliate, so bad laws, as in unfair laws. Spiked coffee, corretto, is literally corrected. Corrected with what? So improved with what? With alcohol, so spiked coffee. And then, ma abbiamo pure dei difetti, but we also have flaws. Abbiamo pure difetti, ma ha pure dei difetti, oppure dei difetti o anche dei difetti, is a meme expression when someone starts to list all of your issues and you answer like, sì, ma ho anche dei difetti, yes, but I also have flaws, to be ironic and sarcastic and to dismiss a bit all the negative things that people said about you because you are treating them as they were features, not flaws. And then, as I said, we have once again one last chorus, which is always the same. That's why I'm not repeating it. That works, functions, serves as an outro for the lyrics. Now, what did J-Ax say about his own song? Because, so, of course, some journalists asked him, but how was this song born? So he said the idea of the song was born from those US movies like Eat, Pray, Love, which in Italian, fun fact, is Mangia, Prega, Ama, where the whole of Italy is depicted as the Tuscan countryside, and it's very funny because it is very common that you have all these foreigner movies where like you have one city, like one countryside city, and that is all of Italy. Like it's all like this. And from the baker to the mechanic, everybody is as handsome as a model. And for some reason, they're all waiting to fall in love. And here I'm quoting J-Ax with a US MILF having a midlife crisis. And he said, I love how US people depict this Italy that for them is like a dream. And he said, for me, if I had to live in a place like that, for me it would be like hell. Like the day after, I'm going to kill everybody. So, like just to put it into perspective. Anyway, in the meantime, I have my beautiful cat that is kicking me. Rumi. Anyway, so what else? I really recommend watching the video. I know. I always recommend that, but in this case, even more because there are layers on layers on layers for this song that really it never stops coming, basically. So already how it starts, you can see a very old TV on a bedside table, something like that, where there is a centrino. How do I explain what is a centrino? So in Italy, pretty much everywhere, you have a lot of grandmas very good with crochet or I don't know, embroidery. So you can find in many Italian houses these decorations for surfaces. So a little bit like tablecloth, but very much decorated. In fact, it is also often on drawers and whatnot as part of the decorative furniture. Okay. But it is very much synonym of old because again, it's something, fun fact, I do crochet, so it's not that I can really complain about it, but it is something more related to what our grandmothers used to do, okay? So just to put into perspective, Italy is old. We have an issue where we are a bit stuck in the past, and in fact this is one of the problems. Of course, here we have a country song. He did it on purpose because he was saying this song is made for foreigners, mainly US people who have a completely distorted way of seeing Italy. So like he's using the country which is typically US to communicate this. And in fact, you can see typical instruments from country as a music genre, but also elements typical of US. For example, we can see cheerleaders. Cheerleading is something that in Italy almost does not exist. I think I never saw a cheerleader in my life in Italy. It's not something we do. Then you have, for example, two young men who are protesting, and then they are being chased by police, like actually from a member of Carabinieri, because you can see that he has red stripes on his side, which is typically of the uniform of Carabinieri, which is actually part of the army. Because we had, and I already explained in other videos, we have several issues with young people. Here, like the guys are more university age, but the problem is that we had students being beaten in the squares while manifesting, not being aggressive, by the way, even when they were from high schools, like being beaten by police in assault asset. So just to put it in perspective. So this is a criticism. Then we can see priests, nuns, because of the issues we have due to the heavy influence of Catholic Church. And then, of course, our football or soccer fan players. I also think that there is a reference to 6-7, but I'm not sure. You tell me. And then we have again references to country, and then again references to the Catholic Church once again. And then if you check on the TV, generally you can see that there are the words of the lyrics. In fact, the official video also works as a lyric video. But every now and then there are combo of pictures. What is the first four images combo? A Vespa, so like the broom broom, a slice of pizza, a little cup of coffee, and a red woman high heel shoes. Why? Because when Italy is represented outside of Italy, what is the Italia Starter Pack? Vespa, pizza, caffè, moda, because the high heel is representative of fashion and design. Then again, we have more cheerleader. We have direct reference to the azzurri, so our football, soccer, like gli azzurri in general are the representative of the Italian national. Here, however, we see soccer football players. Because we are having issues with them where they are they are paid enormously and their results are ridiculous. So, of course, another criticism of how Italy spends its money. Then we have a reference to how the delivery operators, the delivery people, the people doing the deliveries are being treated, which is very poorly. And then again, we have the cheerleader eating, guess what, pizza and pasta, because another clear representation of that. Then you have a politician with a much younger woman on his side, very, very good representation of our politics situation, which is again not very flattering, but also with a little bit of truth in it. And then we have another combo. What is the other combo? A red glass of wine, a cathedral, so wine, Italian art, at least architecturally speaking. There is we can call it like this, Roman helmet, because also there. And then we have spaghetti with meatballs or tomatoes, I don't know. Anyway, meatballs are not really our thing. There is a whole story behind it, but it is like, of course, pasta, spaghetti, very Italian representation of things. And then we have two models, once again representing the Italian fashion, very typical mainly of Milan, because Milan fashion capital, of course. And then we have at the end, right before the end, J-Ax coming to turn off the TV where the lyrics and the representations are going. And the last starter pack we have is a gun, a document. I can see if it is a passport or what. But yeah, like maybe something voting, I don't know. Money, probably representing corruption, and an X on a house, because as I was explaining, it is almost impossible nowadays to be able to buy or even rent houses because of the imbalance between the cost of life and the wages. So probably this last combo, it is the negative side, because until now we saw the stereotypical ways to represent Italy, but the good ones. Here, however, we had the negative side, so not being able to live, to own your own house, a lot of corruption, and a lot of violence and crime happening. So that's what could be that I missed several things, because there are many things happening in the video. Let me know in the comments what other Easter eggs you noticed that I didn't mention. Anyway, so this was everything I had to say about Italia Starter Pack by J-Ax. There are many things more that could be said, because of course this is a general criticism to how Italy is and how Italy it is portrayed wrongfully outside of Italy. For any question, of course, let me know, but also let me know what you think about this song. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Grazie everyone for watching and arrivederci.